Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Bones and bones and dry bones and bones and bones and dry bones and bones and bones and dry bones, and that's the word of the Lord. The big toe connected to the little toe connected to the ankle bone. Oh boy, look at all these bones, mummified bones, all around me. I don't think I'm ever going to get out of here to make it to the show in time. I'm afraid of tripping over these bones. There's such a pile of bones. It's bones and dry bones.
Why, thank you very much, Tim. I appreciate that. Well, and I'm sorry you're not going to be with us tonight because we really do have a fascinating program. We've got two excellent guests we have with us tonight, Barry FITZGERALD and Stephen Mera, and we are going to be talking about mummies. Not the Boris Karloff or the Abbott and Costello types of mummies, but we're going to be talking about the controversial South American mummies. And let me just give you a little bit of information about our two guests. We have Barry FITZGERALD, who has nearly 30 years of experience in the world of supernatural investigations. He's appeared in all 56 episodes of Ghost Hunters International, and he headed the team on the American NBC-owned Sci-Fi Network and explored a cadre of paranormal and supernatural phenomena around the globe. He's also the author of a number of fascinating books, including the trilogy of fiction books, The Council of Three, The Malice of Darkness, and Fracture, which was released in March of 2007. Now, also with us tonight is Stephen Mera. Steve has been on our show before, and he first became interested in the subject of UFOs and the paranormal at an early age after leaving secondary school, and he's just been involved in all kinds of fascinating investigations. And I tell you, Steve, your book, the House of Fire and Whispers, absolutely fantastic. You did. The investigation that you and the others conducted there. I just you came up with results that I don't think anybody else has ever came up before, especially the EVPs that weren't like the normal EVPs where most of them are like that, but the ones that you got were just so clear and fascinating. So congratulations, really, on such a great book and such a great investigation.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a difficult investigation. 2 trips to Seattle, but we got it all sorted out in the end. Unfortunately, the owner had to move, as we know. But we believe the house is been purchased by another family now, so we are keeping our eye on things, should we say?
Oh, that'll be interesting. I would love to see if there will be a continuation of the phenomena, because I know that from the book that the previous owners of that house didn't stay there very long.
That's correct. Yeah, but possibility it could continue.
Right. Well, and Barry, welcome to Exploring the Bizarre. So happy that you could join us tonight. Now, I need to point out to everyone that since we'll be talking about the Nazca Mummies of Peru, Barry was the director of the film, The Mysterious Bodies of Peru, the beginning, which can be seen on YouTube right now. And I know Tina has a link on our website for this video. And Steve and Barry, both of you, I watched this video. And again, I mean, you guys did a fantastic job with this. But, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself with this. So since it is just myself, Tim Beckley, and is not here, and you two, it's just, we'll just keep this kind of like a, really just a roundtable discussion. So both of you feel free, to jump in and answer questions as I ask them. Don't be afraid to speak out, but whoever wants to answer first, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Nazca Mummies? I remember, last year, I think is when it was, seeing a little news report that I was not too sure whether it was legitimate or not, about somebody finding a number of mummies in South America that they thought were possibly of extraterrestrial origin. And then this year, Gaia TV came out with all of this, and so I figure that this is probably the same situation. So somebody tell me, I mean, what's the situation here? What are the Nazca Mummies?
Sorry about it. Well, I think it pretty much came about. I mean, we were aware that Gaia TV had put out the information regarding what we refer to as the body Maria. These are bodies. It's the terminology they've used is mummies, but they do have their internal organs, so they actually are bodies. But I first became aware visually, should we say, in a visual sense, of Gaia's first release this summer over the internet from their investigation of Maria when they traveled to Peru with Jaime Maussan, a Mexican journalist, and a number of photographers and doctors and so on and so forth. However, we were aware of the discoveries long before that, right at the beginning of the year. We were working with a number of people, one of which was the French ambassador of the Inkari Institute, where these things were simply turned up, dropped on the counter, in a sense of speaking. And it came to our attention about that, and we were obviously very curious at the time. But at the same time, we've investigated things like this, Tim, before. I mean, if it's not skinless raccoons that are washed up on the shore of beaches, it's tailless skinned monkeys caught in traps, or it's people that have glued bits and bobs together to make fairies. The stories go on and on and on, But this was curious. We were curious about this because if this was manufactured, it was done extremely well. We have to admit, but it's not impossible. And we thought, obviously, the way the story was going, it seemed to be leading straight down the same old familiar path. With this, unusually, there's the same sort of people that tend to be involved in these sort of investigations, and we really wanted to know the answers. To be honest with you, we just wanted to know the truth. I mean, not just about the so-called discovery, but what's behind the scenes, who's discovered this, how, when, and those people involved, and of course the whole stance as to how these things are certainly found. And of course, how the Peruvian government deal with such things, how they're going to view this. And so the only way, I mean, we're listening to thousands of conversations over the internet going backwards and forwards every day about this. There's avid believers in it. There's people dismiss it immediately as a hoax, just like many other things, and rightly to do so in many cases. But really, for us, it's this matter of, if we want the truth, we really literally have to, go to the source. We have to talk to the people involved. We have to really dig into this, conduct examinations, and do literally as much as we can. So basically, we decided to get together And myself and Barry, who've been watching this like a hawk, decided basically that was enough. We'd have to go over. The only way to get the real truth is to literally go there. Logistically, we travelled all the way to Peru, and well, not just once, but I think Barry's second trip as well. And it was just a matter of gathering as much evidence as we possibly can. We wanted to make sure that we were completely transparent. People are going to see exactly what unfolds as it happens. The whole documentary was about it being raw, allowing the viewers to see step by step exactly what we were facing, and just call it as it is. You know, we don't have belief systems in regards. We just want to purely get the evidence and base our conclusions upon that, and that's pretty much how that came about.
Well, do you know where these bodies were initially discovered?
Barry?
We do have an idea of where they were discovered. It was during our trip there that we got to speak to some of the guys and understand the geography of the landscape of Nazca. You see, during the interview, there are several descriptions that were put out. And that we released within the documentary at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And it gives us clues of where this location was. Now the problem that we faced on the ground, that both Steve and I faced, is that even though we have a really good idea of where this location is, we couldn't pursue the idea of going to look for it, even if we got the opportunity, because the people that surrounded this case within Nazca, the Waquiros, Waquiro, by the way, I should point out, are these grave robbers. We were told we'll be shot. Mm-hmm. If we went looking for this, we would be shot and we would be buried in a shallow grave in the desert, and no one would know where we were. Much like a weekend break to Vegas. But for us, I gotta say, you know, we were there to track the mummies, the mummies per se, mm-hmm. and for us, we had to keep our focus very much on the mummies and the fact that that's what we were there to do. This distraction of where they come from in Nazca was a debate that went down a completely different rabbit hole. But we do have an idea of where they come from because of certain signatures that are left within the landscape. But we just physically couldn't go there because of the threat to ourselves. And that was a really big thing for us to consider, because we were already somewhere, let's face it, we were already somewhere that was completely out of our comfort zone, and ended up doing things and getting calls and traveling to places that we'll discuss further on in the interview. Mm-hmm. That really set us outside of that comfort zone that we normally like to operate in.
Well, it just it makes me curious as to, you know, their origin, considering the other skulls that have been discovered in really generally the same general area that's in the museum locally, and I can't offhand remember what the name of those skulls are, but you know, they have extremely elongated skulls. Mm-hmm. More so than you know, natives that have just been boarded. And so I was just curious if, you know, possibly there could have been a connection, you know, between the two.
Yep. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like you said, that wasn't, and you know, do you think that as time goes on and you continue your investigation, you know, you'll try to, you know, make an attempt, despite the fact that of the threat of being buried in the big desert somewhere. To try to get a better understanding of where these things were actually found, because I read something today. And of course, this is just, third-hand information, talking about how apparently some of the discoverers said that they were seeing actually live versions of these things running around in the location that they found these bodies.
I think for us, Tim, the idea that we pretty much sure we know where the location is, because of certain clues that were left, and these clues are impossible to hide. The problem that we faced is that the Vaqueros are certainly trying to keep their site of discovery free from prying eyes, and the Peruvian government, I gotta add. But for us, the clues are too big to ignore. Mm-hmm. And if we get the opportunity, irrelevant of what Vaqueros are saying as to where the location of these chambers are, we believe we know where they are. And depending on part two, that we may be making our way back to Peru. And with the help of the Peruvian government, we will be going to that location.
Mm-hmm. So do you have any idea how these bodies then, ended up, in the hands of Gaia TV and then revealed to the outside world?
Well, it started off with the Inkari Institute, which is based in Cusco, Peru. It's a small team of people who dedicate their lives to investigating and researching archaeological finds and discoveries. They've been doing a lot of work in the Amazon over the years, and I admit, from what we've gathered from visiting that location and talking with these people, that they have done some very interesting and very good work, and they've also assisted a lot of people. The kind of adopted families, in a sense of speaking, from in the Amazon area, and they really looked after them. So they have been doing some good work. The president, Tierra Hamming, who's been involved a lot in regards to the surrounding of these, the discovery of these bodies, has publicly announced on numerous occasions and done interviews about how this story came to be. And apparently, it's as simple as these gentlemen walked in to the Inkari Institute and basically just dropped these things on his counter, and said, if you would like to conduct some analysis on these, to find out the legitimacy of these, then they're fine, that we're going to leave these with you. But they certainly hammered home the fact that they do own these bodies, and at any time they can retrieve them, take them away. Of course, there was a lot of concern at that time for Thierry, because he's done quite a considerable amount of good work. The Peruvian government had recognised that by even releasing a coin in commemoration of the work that he'd done. He'd actually placed on the back of the coin some petroglyphs from a photo that he'd taken whilst in the Amazon, and published in his book about those discoveries. So they were certainly aware of his work and quite happy with him. But he had immediately he was concerned, because the question is where these come from. Now, if he thought straight away, obviously these have been taken from some form of resting place, some tomb or something. And if that is the case, then the Peruvian government are going to be all over this, because they do consider it quite a serious crime, any form of tomb raiding, especially even removing items. And of course, these have just been dropped on his counter, and he was left with a huge task because that threw him and his team, the whole institute, to the wolves, basically, because of course, when he went public with this information, he managed to get some money together to conduct some very basic forms of analysis early on in the year. I don't believe those results came until just prior to Maria being discovered. However, he didn't really know how to deal with this. He was stuck in the middle because trying to making sure that he had to keep the identity of these tomb raiders or whoever these people are secret, and at the same time trying to find out the analysis as best as possible, the results of what these things were, what they represented. They'd heard of three-fingered beings before. That's nothing new in Nazca, because even the ancestors, the Nazca ancestors say basically they talk of three-fingered beings, and even the sighting of these things. And of course, when the story surrounding the discovery of this tomb was purely by accident, apparently. And when they managed to scramble in there, they opened up they were interconnecting tunnels. But they do claim to have seen several small beings fleeing down these interconnecting tunnels, and also the sighting of a larger being, which had a blue tint colour to her skin before disappearing. And they were faced with two sarcophagi, one of which was opened, and they found, I believe, around about 20 small bodies in there. Some of them missing skulls, but they did later find skulls just scattered around, apparently, on the floor and in these tunnels. And then, of course, Maria, and a smaller one, which is known as Wahita, were discovered partially buried in the soil, which has had some unusual properties within the soil as well. So they would have to deal with all this. And of course, the press went mad with this. And of course, Gaia picked up on this information, being in touch with Inkari Institute, and had visited the location to examine Maria. And of course, that was the first thing that we actually saw in the press and over the internet, was from their very first visit.
It amazes me that so far they've been able to keep these bodies out of the hands of the Peruvian government, because, like you said, I mean, these are these are considered valuable artifacts, and if the government can get a hold of them, I mean, they'll confiscate them, and I'm sure that anybody that are found with them would be suffering pretty large jail time. Well, gentlemen, it's time for me to take us into our first break. So we will continue the discussion on exploring the bizarre. So stay tuned. We'll be back for more.
Now back to exploring the bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal, your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Welcome back to Exploring the Bizarre. Tonight we are talking about the mysterious Nazca bodies, and we have with us Barry FITZGERALD and Steve Mera. And I encourage you that if you have any questions that you would like to ask our guest, please feel free to do so. We love to hear from you, and we will try to answer your questions as best as we possibly can. So, gentlemen, for those of our audience who may not have heard about these strange bodies, why don't you tell us just exactly what they're dealing with? I mean, what did they find, and what makes them so unusual?
Harry?
Well, I got to say that when these bodies were first presented to us, and it came at the end of a very, very unusual day, and we got a phone call in the middle of the night, and Steve took the call, and this call was an arrangement to see these particular bodies. Initially, we weren't quite sure what we were going to see, And we were given strict instructions on what we could film, what we could record, and everything else. And then this car picked us up at the hotel the following morning, and off we went. And we were already at 11,000 feet in Cusco, which is the capital, the former capital of the Incan civilization, and a beautiful place. But lo and behold, 11,000 feet wasn't enough, and we started to climb up into the mountains. And I got to say, even Steve and I, we could hear the engine of the car struggling for air. Never mind ourselves, because we're certainly not used to that type of altitude. But we continued to climb up into the mountains anyway. And finally, we arrived at this location that we hadn't seen before, and entered this building. And lo and behold, we walked into this room with men dressed in surgical outfits, and we were presented with these bodies. And I got to say that the first body that was presented to us, as Steve happened to say before, he felt as if we were being tested, because it was quite blatant that it was a forgery. But then this small body must have been no more than 20 inches long, if that. Very, very stick-like, and had this what seemed to be a type of fish's head. Now, Steve was already aware that this particular body had surfaced sometime before. Pardon the pun, with it being a fish. But he was very aware that this was a fake, and we were presented with the X-rays and everything else, and we took our time, and we recorded what we could, and examined it for what it was worth. But I got to say, then things started to change, because then these hands were brought out, and the hands themselves, they're around maybe again 20 inches long, but they were chopped off. So you had really the palm of the hand with these 3 fingers extending from it, these mummified fingers. The hands themselves were covered in flesh. They had 6 joints, and 6 parts to the fingers. Whereas we only have 3, 4, I think. And very, very strange, very strange. And within some of the hands there was these pieces of metal, and one of the hands, in fact, had this huge big circular plate, which looked like it was made out of either bronze or some type of gold, and it was attached to the upper side of the hand. Now, some samples had been taken from one of the hands for analysis previous to us seeing them, and very, very, very strange. Again, the X-rays were presented; we were able to see them, but they were covered. Both the body before and these hands were covered in this type of white covering, which was very unusual. But it really started getting very interesting when they presented then the complete bodies of these smaller creatures. And I gotta say creature, because although it in all its extremities, it was very human-like. The ends of the hands and the feet, they had 3 fingers and 3 toes. But these creatures were only around 25 inches long. They had the head of what we would typically identify as being a type of grey. The face itself looked like what we would associate a grey. And I must admit, Tim, coming from Ireland and having worked in the mythology and the folklore and everything else of not only Ireland but around the world, I find myself torn between the fascination of what we were filming and what we were actually in the presence of, but I was also torn with this idea of looking at this from my ancestral standpoint, to think, hold on a second, are these the buggers that have terrorized my ancestors right up to the present day? Are these the creatures that are responsible for this? So there was a type of loathing almost that was developing within myself as I stood in awe looking at these particular creatures. But Steve and I, we got to investigate them further and look at these at these X-rays that were being presented to us, and we were able to see through the X-rays that there were some things which made us very curious, such as no ball joints and things like that on their arms, and there seemed to be, in one of them there was a problem with its hip, and there was also a type of metal that was attached to the hip, very, very unusual in that, and tests. I believe, Steve, that there were no tests that were carried out on those particular creatures.
No, there were no tests that had been carried out on the smaller creatures. We asked that question at the time, especially when we were overlooking. There were two complete bodies which were brought out at 25 inches in length, and they believed that, well, it was addressed to us that one was a female and one was a male. I mean, of course, we looked at each other, myself and Barry, because if we are dealing with something quite profound, then who are we to know which is which? But what they did point out is, and it was clearly seen on the X-rays as well, that the one they referred to as the male seemed to have a longer neck, which they believed could be adjusted. It could adjust its neck's length, a bit like Steven Spielberg's E.T. in the sense of speaking. And the female, which had a shorter neck, seemed to have some type of metal, a very similar type colour, metal plate across the chest area. And the only way I can describe it, what looked like she had an enlarged abdomen area. And under X-ray, looked like there were 3 eggs, or something of that nature, inside. Which, of course, I looked over at Barry and immediately thought, well, if these things are real, then they do seem to have a bit of a reptilian nature,
or like birds.
Yep,
reptiles and birds. Yeah, and plus. A lot of reptiles, birds as well, have 3 toes.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, we looked very carefully. We totally examined the bodies. We went over. We took measurements. We took sizes, references. We went through the X-rays. We documented everything. Of course, we did question the fact that they seemed to be lacking some ball joints and enlarged certain bones across the chest, and there were some things that didn't seem to add up. But then we were identifying what looked like real bones. To be honest with you, it didn't seem to have any lungs. Don't know how these things could have even breathed, let alone fed themselves, because it doesn't seem to have jaw bones. And anatomically, it was a very profound. But they do seem to be real bones, and looks like there is flesh there. And of course, we presented a third one, which was once in a sitting position this time, missing its head. But which was interesting because apparently some samples had already previously been taken from the neck area. And looking closely at that, it did seem to show what looked like neck muscles, and of course the connecting of the spine. And of course, this is missing its skull, but it was in a sitting position, which led us to, we have a bit of an idea of certainly if these things were real, then maybe how did they move? Because it would have been very difficult, I suppose, without some ball joints. Maybe we would have walked. I can just imagine. I mean, I know that these discoverers claim to have seen these things running away, but I would have probably laughed if I see these things running away because very stiff jointed, certainly, and I probably would have giggled a little bit. But nevertheless, though, it was absolutely fascinating. But that was when the whole room seemed to change then, because we were a very large box was brought out, and I think that was a plastic box, Barry, was it?
It was, yeah. Again, your mind's still reeling from what you had just seen with these smaller two bodies, which I might also point out that the bones themselves were knitted, which means they are not child bones. Whatever these things were, they were fully grown. So that left us very, very curious. But then everything changed, because they brought out this box, and I continued to roll with the cameras. Steve was very much in front of the camera, and I was very careful about trying to capture everything that there was, and everything that we were allowed to capture. And they brought out this box, and once the lid was taken off, everything changed. Because before it was very much like any examination of a particular body. It was everything was grand. It was very, very, I suppose, energetically it was flat. But the moment the lid was taken off this box, something changed. And it was the atmosphere in the room was palatable, and I looked at Steve and tried to indicate from behind the camera, oh my God, there's something different with this, and it was exceptionally moving and powerful. What seemed to be emanating from this particular body, which I can't explain. I don't know what this was, but there's something different about this particular one. Now, whenever we say different, this particular body was around the size of maybe 5. I think it was 5 foot. Isn't that right, Steve?
I think about 5'2", I think. Yeah.
Yeah. A regular size for a human being, but it had 3 large fingers on each hand and 3 toes, 3 large toes, on the feet. Now, it got really, really interesting, because on the feet, we were able to see even the dermal ridging on the toes. And this is a very, very hard thing to fake. We spent a lot of time with this body, which became known as Maria. We spent a very, very long time with her, exploring and taking as many detailed shots as we possibly could. But I couldn't shift this sense of this, whatever it was. And at the time, we didn't know, is this real or is this fake? We actually didn't know. I'm looking upon this thinking to myself, what is going on with this body? If the main trunk of the body is definitely real. At the time I couldn't pass judgment on the fingers or the toes, whether they were real or not. But there was something special about that main trunk of the body of whoever this person was. They must have been almost revered. And I can tell you this quite categorically. I can tell you that if that person was alive today, I could not have stood in a room with this person, because they would have brought me to my knees. It was exceptionally powerful, and something that if I will never ever forget.
No, I don't think it'll be anything I will forget neither, Tim. If you can just imagine the scene as this plastic box lid is taken off and Maria's taken out very carefully and placed on an examination table. I looked across at Barry and I saw the tears running down his eyes and the blood red face. I thought, it was difficult us dealing with the altitude, because we were suffering also from altitude sickness, early morning vomiting and nausea and headaches and puffing and panting, because we weren't used to the altitude. And I looked over at Barry and he just very silently went, "Oh my God." And I'm looking over him thinking, "Oh my God, I'm going to lose my cameraman here." Because he thought he was going to wave and go down, And and of course we were totally transfixed on the rear. And of course, as Barry said, we are most definitely dealing with a body here. There's absolutely, it's very easy to identify that. As for the fingers and toes, very, very strange. She was missing. She has a slightly elongated head, which could be a process of boarding. It's not as the same as the hugely elongated skulls that have been discovered throughout Cusco, Nazca, and are situated in museums. It wouldn't seem that she would have an increased brain mass. Maybe it could have been a process of boarding, but we did notice that her eye socket seemed larger than average, a very small nose, and small mouth, with no ears, which again, seems to fall in line with some amphibians and seals. And of course, I did pose that question because we were starting to think: if this is real, is this some type of amphibian of some sort?
Yeah.
Even Barry suggested, could there have been any webbing between the toes or fingers, and that's lost, as skin disappears over long periods of time. It was just completely very strange. But there was a couple of other things, anomalies. There was a larger gap between the two bones in the arms, which was clearly identical. It looked to be a female due to the rib count. It's only only surmising that, obviously. But obviously something was very special about her, and of course she was covered in all this white. Now, if from what we're being told that from some of the previous tests, that this white powder, which was initially thought to be plaster by many people who had seen the photos and video footage over the internet, he was immediately jumped on by saying, "Oh, she's covered in plaster, Paris," and things like that. However, some of the analysis come back, and it's not just once but twice, referred to the white as being diatomaceous earth, which is, for those listeners that are not too sure what that is, it's kind of fossilized micro shells. There's been minerals, but they're very, very fine, and of course that is produced from the seabed. But as many will know geologically, that the Nazca Mountains range was probably the seabed at one time, and been pushed up through tectonic plate shifts and land movement for over millions of years, and these areas of diatomaceous earth have popped up in locations, and apparently they have unique properties, and some of those properties are preservative. They do preserve bodies extremely well. They lock in bacteria, so that bacteria cannot can thrive on the body. Plus, it also is a repellent to insects, those type of insects that might feed on certain things like that. And it would act as a wonderful preservative. However, it would seem from our examination that this isn't just simply as a body who's just been draped in some diatomite or even buried in it. It looked to be purposely applied throughout the whole body. In other words, it had been purposely put on the body. As to the reasons why, I can only think is to act as a preservative of some sort. However, we've also got to take into consideration that the white powder covering of this diatomaceous earth is also something that could hide a multitude of sins. So we have to sort of, we like we said right at the beginning, we certainly call it as it is, and keep that middle ground, really, because we just want to make sure what we are looking at, is it authentic or not. And it would seem that this has been purposely applied to the body. As to how and when, that's a different story, but that may reveal something through analysis. And of course, once we've conducted everything, and all the X-rays that came out and the scans, and you can clearly see on the X-rays that she's definitely a body, absolutely not manufactured body. But what was very interesting was the length of the toes, which had extra cartilages in the feet and the toes to give it its length. How it would have walked is very questionable, because as far as we are concerned, they wouldn't have been made great walkers, but they wouldn't have been very steady on the feet without the stabilizing of toes, the widening of the foot. It would have been very difficult probably for them to have walked by the looks of it.
And no thumbs.
And no thumbs, no 3 long fingers, no thumbs. And again, this would represent maybe something that was either swimming in water or climbing trees. This is what we tend to see in nature. We don't tend to see many ground dwelling animals without thumbs of some sort. And the dermal ridging was very unusual because, as we know from dermal ridging, that it consists of swirls and patterns, just like our fingers and our toes. However, though that she does have dermal ridging on her toes, which are very clearly visible, they consist of more like straight lines, which is very unusual. A bit like again, like a reptile, which seem to have straight lines across the ridging. But all in all, she was absolutely profound. Well, I mean, the
dermal ridging. There are some theories out there, because we actually don't really know what the dermal ridging is for, and there are some theories, some schools of thought out there that the dermal ridging is used for grip, especially if the skin gets wet.
Mm-hmm. All right, gentlemen. Well, we have to go to our top of the hour break here. So when we come back, let's continue our conversation about the mysterious bodies of Nazca. So you're listening to Exploring the Bizarre. I'm Tim Schwartz. Stay tuned.
Exploring the bizarre. Your e-ticket ride into the world of the paranormal. Strap yourself in as we traverse the universe, exploring the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology, as well as other dimensions. It's time to take back the night. Now, your electrifying hosts of Exploring the Bizarre, Timothy Beckley and Tim Schwartz.
Welcome back to the second hour of Exploring the Bizarre. I'm Tim Schwartz. Unfortunately, Tim Beckley could not be with us tonight, and we do miss him. But we will try to carry on without him for the rest of this show. With me is Barry FITZGERALD and Steve Mera, and we have been talking about the Nazca mummies, but they're more like bodies, as they pointed out. And in the first part of this show, Steve and Barry were talking about their really fortunate opportunity to closely examine these bodies, several small versions. And now they got to examine, what was her name? Maria? Is that what they call her?
Yeah, that's correct.
Maria, who, and this body was larger. I mean, then I realized that she possibly could be just a little bit shorter, just, due to the, drying out process. But she's definitely much taller than the smaller versions. Now, you mentioned that Maria had dermal ridges. Did you see these on her toes or her fingers or both?
Oh yeah. There is nails on the fingers. That's unusual. And of course, we saw the dermal ridging on the toes, and of course, we didn't want to. You have to be very careful when dealing with such things. You didn't want a toe to just come off in your hand,
Oh, sure. Did the smaller ones did they have dermal ridges? I mean, could you see that, or were they just too desiccated?
We didn't see any form of dermal ridging on anything. There was nothing about the small ones that represented anything that looked like a body as we'd know it, as we'd recognize the body. Until Maria was actually put in front of us, we immediately recognized Maria for it being an actual body. As for it being human or not, that's all going to fall down to the DNA, and the results at the end of the day. But we were very surprised that they allowed us to film as much as we could. Just as Barry said earlier, that the whole day about being picked up. I mean, when we got that phone call in the early hours of the morning and said, look, someone's going to pick us up from the hotel. We can't film this person. We're not allowed to identify the vehicle. We cannot film the location. It was like, well, what's the point of going? What can we film? I mean, we were very limited in the little bits that we could film. And even when we managed to get some bits done in the car, as we climbed out of Cusco and headed towards the mountains, because we had no idea where we were going, of course, being instructed to leave our cell phones behind as well. I mean, you can well imagine that getting a call at 15 minutes past 2 in the morning, waking up, going through this. And I'm, ironically, in the way I am, I just said, yes, we'll do it. It was, and of course, Barry's like, after the phone call, what have you just done? And I said, well, okay. Oh my God, yeah, we can't take our cell phones. And it was like, oh, where are we heading? What's going to happen? We didn't contact our partners back at home and tell them this. You can well imagine, because they just would have said, don't do this. But we'd travelled halfway around the world. It was, we have such an appetite to find out the truth about such things. We thought, well, we're just going to have to go with the flow. And of course, traveling up into those mountains, it was getting thinner and thinner, the air, to the point where, I mean, I thought we were, how come they're not actually put something over our heads or blindfolded us? Because I thought that was the next thing going to be coming. And
yeah, that's just what I was thinking.
Exactly. And I realized why they didn't, because as soon as you get out into the mountains, there's nothing but just dirt paths. There's no names on roads. They're just dusty dirt paths. And they twist and turn and separate and take a left and right. And we had no idea where we were. It was literally us, the mountains, and condors. That was it. And of course, the driver just did this sign to cut your recordings. And of course, okay, we're going to have to turn the cameras off now. And it was literally, on many occasions, we were worried, especially when you pull up to locations where you see several people staring at you and wild dogs scrapping each other outside the front of these buildings. And you think, oh my God, what have I got myself into? But as it unfolded into this scruffy building, just suddenly transformed as soon as you walked into this door, where it was a perfectly cleaned, bright, looked like an operation room, and an examination room. It was just really weird. And of course, we had that opportunity to look through all the bodies and get and video as much as we possibly can. We walked away scratching our heads, to be honest with you. We were just scratching our heads. We just no idea. We were just, what the hell have we just seen? And and what are we dealing with here? Now, it was bad enough, the fact that, we were having to look over our shoulder, and and that is the truth, and we were paranoid, because even on the trip to Peru, when we left the UK and travelled to Madrid, and then on to Lima, the capital of Peru, and then up to Cusco. But when we arrived at Lima, we were met by somebody who basically said, because we were in conversation, myself and Barry, and we didn't, we were just talking out openly about what all this stuff is about these bodies. Mm-hmm. Immediately, somebody came over and said, you shouldn't be talking about that. You got to be careful about what you're talking, because there are people looking for those that might know information about this. Apparently, the Peruvian government was seriously on this case, to the point where police had already done several raids of buildings trying to find these bodies, and also trying to find those that were involved with it, because we were looking at a 10-year stretch to begin with. And of course, they were mad on this, because there'd been so much hype about this, and of course, with Mexican journalist Jaime Maussan, there's been a huge amount of controversy surrounding this. That the Peruvian government had actually, had really gone to town. They'd really trying their best to find these bodies and find the people, the perpetrators of this raiding of the tombs, or where they've got these bodies from. We were looking over our shoulders. There were people around that seemed to, I don't know if it was just paranoia or not, but they seemed to be hanging around and just trying to over-listen conversations, and it was just not a good environment. We hadn't been faced with that sort of thing before, and as the investigation process continued, we were suddenly cast into this murky world of the black market. And I thought, oh my God, sharks and people who want money and this black market. I thought, no reason, obviously the Peruvian government are all over this. It's simply because of the magnitude, how far this actually goes. This rabbit hole goes very, very deep. And of course, we didn't know that when we got involved in this, but we were steered in this direction. We just couldn't get out of it, and before you knew it, we were sat face to face with a lady who worked for the government, who was commissioned to look into the black market, and they've got a huge problem, the Peruvian government, trying to deal with these issues, artifacts that are being sold on the black market illegally. Now, we were told Maria had a price tag of $1 million. This is by the discoverers that wanted this amount of money for her to sell her. The smaller bodies at 25 inches had a price tag of around about $100,000. And in fact, some artifacts had already been sold on the black market as little as $8,000 to collectors in Asia. So, and apparently there were interest from Russia and all over these different countries. I thought, oh my God, there really is a black market. And of course, I don't know how that works. I don't know who the contacts. It sounds very espionage and cloak and dagger to me, but nevertheless, though, this is what's going on. And it's a massive problem for the Peruvian government, which they obviously cannot handle. There's just so much of this. They're so worried about losing their artifacts. It's such a shame. But at the end of the day, there's a huge amounts of money are involved. And of course, these discoveries, you can't trust these discoveries. I mean, like Barry said, if we started pressing, there were threats of, you could be shot and basically put into the desert and nobody'd ever find you. And I can believe that. I can absolutely believe that by being up there in those mountains, that you feel like you're treading ground where no man's ever tread before, because you just no civilization at all. You could simply just disappear off this planet. And of course, we had to take into consideration the worries that we had when conducting this type of investigation. So we had to tread very, very carefully. But it did become more prominent about the problems that the Peruvian government were giving out pressure in regarding these discoveries when we reached Lima, the capital city of Peru.
I'm surprised that after you were taken up into that mountaintop location, when you came back, that the authorities didn't just haul you in and say, "Okay, where were you? What happened?"
We were thinking that might happen because we thought maybe we're being watched, and if that is the case, then we're going to be dragged in. Right. We're going to end up getting in trouble with this because, we're not even supposed to know where these things are, let alone handle them. So and of course, we have to admit, luckily that we were only when we came back, we were there just for that night, and then we got out of Dodge. We flew straight out into Lima because there was a press announcement, which was the first international press announcement that had taken place. Now, there has been a lot of controversy about Jaime Maussan being involved in this particular case. Now, I just want to make this clear because there's been lots of allegations about Jaime's had these things made and all sorts of things. The situation is that when these were discovered and brought to the Inkari Institute, we were aware of that action taking place. And Gaia, they picked up some of the information because the Inkari Institute were putting out information about some of the work that they've discovered, some of the results from the first lot of analysis. Gaia picks up on that information, and Guy was very interested in being able to film this and finding out more about Maria. But to do so, they didn't have those connections. There were obviously some language barriers, which we struggled with language barriers whilst we were there. And of course, that was probably a concern for Gaia. So they employed the services of Jaime Maussan. Jaime Maussan visited with Gaia to the Inkari Institute, and had the capabilities of being able to examine Maria, but not in the same place where we were. So I don't know exactly where they were at that time. I don't recognize where they were in the video. Maybe it was at different locations that these discoverers went, had the body for them to look at. But Jaime went and he looked, and he's basically, Jaime is, he would obviously lean towards maybe the ETI hypothesis, because there's always that possibility, of course, maybe slim, nevertheless. He would seem that, he's basically been called in to look over the body and give his opinion. And of course, by doing so, Jaime has a number of doctors that have done work with him before. Some of these are known to us, and they have looked over the body and pointed out a number of the anomalies that we've found. Now, that's absolutely honest. I mean, there is some anatomical anomalies in regard to Maria, absolutely, and they're right to pick that up, these doctors, but the question remains, the biggest question is, could they have been doctored? Could they have been manufactured in a way? Have somebody got hold of a body, which apparently has been carbon dated, by the way, guys, on 2 independent research facilities, being something like 240 to 480 AD. We're dealing with something that could very well possibly be around about 1,800 years old, a body. But nevertheless, though, if somebody has located a body like that and conducted these anatomical changes, is that what we're looking at? Or is it simply that she is what she is? A humanoid type figure that seems to have these unusual anatomical differences, especially being 3 toes and 3 fingers. But of course, it doesn't help the situation when certain people like Jaime is addressed to this type of investigation, because he has been involved in a number of other investigations that have turned out to have more mundane explanations. And there are lots of suspicious people out there, and I understand the reasons that might be. However, we had the opportunity, myself and Barry, to interview Jaime at great length whilst we were in Lima. We were there with him at the time because of the press announcement, and he was quite honest in saying, look, he'd gone to the ministry himself and said, look, would you be interested in trying to find out more, work with us? And of course, the ministry just stepped back from it. They didn't want to get involved. Oh no, we don't. We wouldn't even entertain Jaime and his team in regarding going into discussions regarding these discoveries. They just didn't want anything to do with, which is very unusual, because what happened the night prior to the event, the press announcement, was very interesting. If you want to explain what went on there, Barry.
Oh my God! It turned into a complete nightmare for us. Never mind anyone else who was in attendance. You see, we ended up arriving at this hotel, which was a very plush hotel where the press conference was being held. And to film in a hotel, we had to get permission from the hotel staff, from the hotel manager. And that's where our problems began, because it seemed that to gain permission from the hotel, we also had to have permission from the person that organized the event. Now, the event we were there to film on behalf and for the Encari Institute, who were based back in Cusco. So the guys arrived. We got permission from them. I frog marched Thierry to the front desk, and it turned out that that wasn't good enough. That we had to have the person who footed the bill for the entire event had to give us permission before they would sign the paperwork. Now, this was an international press conference that was coming to the hotel, and it seemed that no one in the hotel seemed to know that this was going on. And so as the minutes ticked by, we managed to find the person who had paid for the entire event, told him of the situation. He was notably furious, and said, "Of course you can film." And he sent an email then to the hotel, authorizing us to film. That wasn't good enough. It seems now that the hotel then decided that no, you will need to send an email directly to this particular person, our employee who has been dealing with the event, and the secretary of this person who paid for everything. Now, by this stage, we were already in the last day. It was that morning, in fact, that this fiasco, that this had stretched out over the course of the evening. And it just got to a stage then, we weren't even allowed to see the room that the function was going ahead in.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, how on earth is anyone else going to attend and film in an international press conference? In
fact, Barry, we'd overheard a number of people being turned away because they were coming in and asking the staff, "Where's this event?" And they said, "What event? We don't know what you're talking about." They've been turned away. So this was very, very suspicious.
We noticed a stark increase in security, and the hotel lobby, and one of the stipulations, in fact, actually was that if we were granted permission to film, that they wanted to know who we were filming, and they wanted their names, and they wanted to know if they were going to be staying in the hotel as well. Very, very unusual requests and complications that were going ahead. To be honest, bureaucracy was a complete nightmare, and I'm surprised anything could be done in that country with the bureaucracy. But eventually, of course, the morning came around. We still couldn't find the person. We were told, "Oh, that person will be in at 7:30. 7:30, I was at the desk. She didn't arrive until 8:30. 8:30 came. The press conference, mind you, was beginning at 10 o'clock. 8:30 came. She hadn't arrived. She'll be there at 9:30. 9:30 arrived. She hadn't come. So we just had to say, right, to hell with this. And we forced our way into the room, along with the other cameramen, I might add, and we set up and we filmed the press conference. It didn't end there.
It was a logistic nightmare. I mean, apart from that, they'd gone complete lockdown on the elevators that day, which means that you could only travel to the floor you were staying on, and that was, we couldn't even go to other people's rooms to interview them. It was just every single corner that we turned, there seemed to be a brick wall put in place. But and then they eventually, after all the messing about, the press conference started, and then there were further disturbances, weren't they, Barry?
Oh my goodness! As soon as they took the podium and began to talk and introduce or welcome everyone to the press conference, which was packed, I gotta say, there were cameras from everywhere, right across South America.
How did they manage to get in?
well, that was the thing. They obviously just
we forced our way in there, and they just followed us,
But as soon as the press conference started, then from the floor below us, and it was like clockwork, from the floor below us, this god awful banging, this repetition of continued through the press conference. We thought, what on earth? It actually got to a stage where the press conference had to be stopped because the noise was too loud. It was unbelievable.
It was ridiculous.
The problems that we faced right up until the press conference and during the press conference.
It was very, very difficult. I by this time I'd actually ran off to staff, numerous staff, and was telling them about this noise. We're going to have to deal with something. People, they're turning all the cameras off because it's come to a stop because we can't hear anything. It was that loud. And they just looked at me, they're just profound looks on the face. I said, we need some help, and none of the staff seemed to give any care or concern about this. So this went on for a duration for 20 minutes. It was put back about 20 minutes, this whole event, until it ceased. But it was just perfectly timed. At the time they started talking, this is when this happened. Now, looking back through all this and all the complications we had, we can only assume that there'd been a considerable amount. We do know that there'd been considerable amount of pressure from the Peruvian government. They didn't want this announcement to go ahead. In fact, a month prior to the announcement, they'd put out in the papers a complete discrediting of all this information, that it was all fake and it was all doctored, and don't believe it. And this went across all the national papers in Peru, and of course, but come the time of the event, because we went out and talked to the people on the streets, they hadn't a clue. This was happening under their noses, and nobody had any idea. There'd been no publicizing. Nobody had bothered even trying to publicize this event. And yet, luckily, there was a massive turnout. And I think that could only have been through the internet, the process of the internet, because Peru was certainly going clamped down on this. And it would seem that maybe pressure had been applied, maybe a call had been put forward to the person who runs the hotel, that we weren't going to get this very easy. And that was the end of that.
All right, gentlemen, we need to go to our bottom of the hour break. So when we come back, let's continue this conversation about the press conference. And you're listening to Exploring the Bizarre on KCRL Radio.
Now back to Exploring the Bizarre with two of the most electrifying researchers in the paranormal, your hosts, Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz.
Welcome back to the final segment of Exploring the Bizarre. And we were talking about the press conference from hell there in Lima, Peru. And so, gentlemen, why don't you tell us just exactly what was discussed? What was this press conference about? What did they say that was, or did they say anything that was earth-shattering?
I'll let Bobby explain that one.
Well, I got to say, Tim, that we went into this with high hopes, and we were thinking, this is it. Now the world's going to know. And as we watched, setting aside the fiasco of the banging from the floors below, as we watched, we were being shown X-rays after X-ray after X-ray, and opinion after opinion after opinion from the specialists on the panel. But nothing was being discussed of DNA results. And let's face it, that's what we needed to know. The whole world was sitting waiting on this huge press conference that was being highlighted as being the most important thing since the beginning of time. And all of a sudden, it just suddenly nosedived, as Steve put it, and crashed and burned because they didn't bring their DNA results. And that was we thought was a huge mistake, because if they were wanting to make that impact, they certainly didn't do it, and that led to a lot more questions from our side, because Steve and I, let's face it, we were there to find out the truth. We wanted to find out what really was going on in Peru, who was behind this, and what was happening. And we had to walk that middle ground, and that's something that we focused on specifically within the documentary. Even we walked that middle ground, and I can tell you that we understand the situation that the Peruvian government finds itself in, and I can sympathize, because having your national heritage slip across the borders into other areas around the world and disappear more times forever is a great shame. And I know from my standpoint, being Irish, if I thought that was happening to our stuff, I would be livid, absolutely furious. I'd be determined to try and stop this as well. So we could understand the other side. We can understand the Peruvian government's need to prove these a fake. And I might add that they were doing this without having any analysis. The scientists that came together to claim this was a fraud based their opinions on what they could scrape together off the internet. Now, this is meant to be science. How on earth can they make science from what they can scrape from the internet? That's a heinous act and a terrible abuse of scientific protocol. So, although we can understand the Peruvian government's standpoint in trying to stop and quash this black market, the way they did it, we felt was very wrong. Now, on the other side, we do not approve of the Huaqueros either, going in and grave robbing and everything else. But the poverty in Peru is immense.
Right.
And this is something that we can't state enough Within the Western society, we can be quite comfortable and chastise those that are doing things that may be illegal, and grave robbing and selling off particular items to feed families. Whenever you're there on the ground, you see the poverty in Peru, and it isn't a pleasant thing to see at all. It makes you appreciate what you have at home. So we can understand this, and we wanted to walk this middle ground. But what we felt the press conference did was let the world down, because they never brought the proof.
Yeah, no. Why have a press conference if you don't have the DNA evidence?
It was a very premature act. We believe, what they did is it may provided some of the infantry, but they left the cannons at home, and we said it as it is. We definitely delivered that, and we were very surprised. We were expecting, the results, and it wasn't. And this is the process of it seemed to have been strung out, like Barry's mentioned to us many a times, like dangling that carrot just in front of everybody, so that they keeps that interest and a drive behind this. However, we might get cut short. At the end of the day, we were commissioned to a second visit, and now this is what's interesting, is that we were commissioned by the universities that we are dealing with, proper universities, not these back alley doctors that we often find dealing with many cases like this. These are the top world universities, and they were interested. They looked at the X-rays and things, and they've been interested. So a second visit had to take place, and of course what we've gleaned from that is an amount of information which can be provided to universities to conduct analysis, and that analysis is being provided by universities. The world's leading universities, the world's leading professors in DNA extraction and identification, and this will put it to rest one way or another. And we are going to provide the results. Just be honest and put it out there. And of course, if it should be that doctors who have been involved in this have made false claims, then the light will be shined upon them in regarding what their statements, because things like this cannot keep going on. It can't keep continuing, especially when there are several crimes being committed here. And we understand how the Peruvian government are very upset about this. We also believe that they've been made a number of international calls to people who have been involved, because they really do want to clamp down. They're looking for, they're really against the way that the people that have been involved in this case right from the beginning have tracked this and now dealing with this. They're very upset with them, and of course, they could be liable in numerous different ways. However, as we move into episode 2, we are going to be revealing a huge amount of information. And yes, we've already got some of our guns. We are going to be waiting to get all our cannons, and not unlike Jaime, we are going to deliver everything in one fell swoop, and provide all that data in one go. Of course, there is also the other side of it, is that there is a mystery surrounding some of these beings. There is references all around the world of some of these things. I believe Barry's done research around the world on some of these things, haven't you, Barry?
Yeah, it's amazing. We think of these three-fingered beings, and we think, oh, Nazca, Peru, and everything else. But a lot of these things actually appear closer to home than what we initially suspected. And when you start going back into history, and what our ancestors were dealing with, that's whenever we start coming across these things, and we've been able to track these things back into the prehistory, and it's going to be interesting. That this as Steve has indicated, part 2 is coming, folks, and it's going to be a doozy. I'm absolutely thrilled to be part of it, and there is stuff coming, and my God, it's going to be explosive.
Well, now, okay, did I understand you correctly to say that you were given the opportunity to take DNA samples?
We have, yes. We've got and properly taken and documented as well, because there was an instruction as to how and where these DNA samples were taken from. This is what people don't question. They look at results and think, "Oh, that's really interesting," but they don't question how and where was that taken from.
Yes,
because like we've talked with many people, and even in episode 2, you'll see that we've talked with specialists in how this happens. It's been explained that coverings on bodies can be dated incorrectly because of the covering and not the actual body. And think just as simple as that. DNA extraction can be taken from somewhere where there's contamination, and we were instructed where these things had to be taken from to eliminate those processes. We could not have been any more thorough than we have been, and all that data is currently being analysed, including the metal on the hand. And everything, hair samples, skin samples, bone samples, you name it, the whole lot, and done in such a way that the professionals about the universities wanted it doing, and because of that reason, we were going to be able to reveal the real accurate DNA results and even to the point of mitochondrial DNA. We really are going hell for leather on this.
Well, that was the thing that got me thinking about the DNA samples, is that you really needed to get samples of the anomalous areas on the bodies, the hands, the feet, anything that is really out of the as well as like the body itself, but just anything that appears out of the ordinary that could have been gorilla glued on or whatever. Just to make sure that you're dealing with an actual body and not just something that's just been pieced together and in a basement somewhere.
Well, that was the thing. We wanted to make sure that the fingers matched the body. And that was very, very important, because these tests were not being carried out, much to our disappointment. So this is why it's being done. We want to find out for sure. Now, it's going to go either of two ways. Either the black market, the prices on the black market are going to shoot through the roof, or this will bring a final nail in the coffin to this whole fiasco of these mummies. And as Steve has already pointed out, we're going to tell it as is, and it's going to go either of two ways for the Peruvian government. So they'll be watching, no doubt, as much as anyone else.
Oh yes, I mean, it would seem that they've taken a keen interest in our work. I'm sure they'll be happy to receive, and we're quite happy to work with them. And provide them the results they want. Initially, the most important thing to them is to reclaim these bodies and have them. In fact, they want to actually, have a place to put these in some sort of museum in Nazca. And we're quite happy to work with with the Peruvian government if we can. The unfortunate thing is that we don't know where these bodies are. That's the real downside to it. We just don't know. We have no idea where we were, to be honest with you. And I think that was done obviously purposely so that we couldn't backtrack, because there is always that problem of us spilling the beans, should we say, to the Peruvian government. Sure. Because we do believe, Maria is degrading. She's slowly disappearing, unfortunately. From the first time we saw her appear on the Gaia videos to when we last saw her, or Barry was probably the last person to see Maria. There was some differences, weren't there, Barry?
There was, yeah. We could see those on the elbows, the shoulders, and things like that. We could see that starting to slip through. The way that she's being preserved it's not right. It needs to be dealt with immediately. And this dragging of feet, for whatever purpose, by others, on the results is not going to cut it with us. And in fact, I got to say, we've become exceptionally passionate about it, and driven to bring the results forward, and get that body placed where it needs to be.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you, I'm happy that you were also able to get samples of the metal that was on these bodies, because to me that part's really intriguing, because especially the what looks to be like two circles, and then a bar crossed on the one body's chest. I mean, they're not really that apparent just eyeballing them, but you see them clearly in the X-rays.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just another unusual aspect about this, and as well, I'm surprised actually that they allowed you to take these samples, take the DNA samples, samples of the metal. Because you would think that if somebody was trying to put off a hoax, and I'm going to stay in the middle grounds here about this, you wouldn't think that they would have allowed you to do that, because that would quickly just apparently just reveal like, oh yeah, this is this is a hoax.
I know, yeah, it did cross our mind, but I think we managed to get ourselves into a prime position of being basically putting their backs up against the wall. We say, look, we are going to end this for you if we don't get DNA analysis. It's as simple as that. Because it can't go on. If you start, we will publicize the fact that we will not be allowed to actually take samples. We'll put it out there, and that will be the end of it. Because it'll certainly decrease the value on the black market if people start to think that, oh, I'm dealing with a fake here. And of course, I can understand that, being probably problematic for them. So we kind of backed into a corner, really. I think they'd gone as far as they could at that time. And for it to go on any further, they had to deliver some new information and probably hope that we were going to use maybe some back alley doctors somewhere, which would probably say, oh, well, it's inconclusive. Now, as far as I'm concerned, inconclusive means that, well, it's just not a good enough sample it's taken. But to many other people, inconclusive means, oh my God, it's unidentifiable and it's an alien. Mm-hmm. And this is how people think sometimes, Tim. And the problem is for them is that they want to make sure that Maria keeps her value because they're looking to sell her, and to do that. And now with the pressure that's on them, and it's gone so far, is that I think they were backed into a corner of having to allow us to do that. And keeping their fingers crossed that something inconclusive will come back. But probably what they don't realise is that we've used the best universities in the world and the best professors in DNA extraction. These guys do this for a living, day in, day out. And in fact, some of the people that are involved in this have been involved in the most significant cases which have been documented in regarding DNA analysis throughout the world. So, and even to the point of utilizing new technology in DNA analysis, we were blown away the day before yesterday with new information of some form of DNA growth and extraction that they're planning on doing, which is completely, it is cutting edge science, which not many people know even exist. And we, whatever they deliver, it's going to be the results. I doubt it very much that they'll come back with inconclusives. Because of the amount of DNA that was obtained and the process of it was taken from, they guided us the whole way through that process. So I think we'll deliver real concrete results when we get them and make them public.
Mm-hmm. And I got to say that we do already know some things, but we're not going to make the same mistake as the press conference. We will hold everything and we will release it all at the same time.
Good for you. Well, now I know that you can't get this from the DNA, but I mean, did you get samples to possibly get a real carbon dating, on these bodies? Because you had mentioned before that these bodies could be, like a little bit less than 2,000 years old. But what were the sources? Of this carbon dating? I mean, we just can't take their word for it.
No. The first form of analysis was put together by the Inkari Institute, trying to gather some evidence. It was only minor parts of DNA analysis, the very basic stuff, as far as our professors are concerned. But then we have to question everything that's been put out on this so far. The other doctors' statements, the analysis that's been carried out, and results. We have to question everything because we just don't know the sincerity. You actually do some research into some of the doctors and people that have been involved in this, it becomes a little bit questionable, in regarding how credible are some of these people, and of course how much knowledge do they really have, and are they in a position to be able to provide concrete evidence, which is legitimate. So we're going to question. The good thing is that we have all their results as well, and we will cross-examine their results with our results. And of course, our professors have already stepped forward and said we are quite happy to tell you exactly, the difference between theirs and ours, should there be any, and we'll certainly pull that. And that's what's going to be really interesting is the fact is that there is, I believe, going to be quite a few people probably upset. With the results. But it is what it is at the end of the day, Tim. And what we want, and like Barry said, we become very passionate. It's gone on far too long, this. Maria needs to, she's a real person at some point, and she needs to be looked after. She needs to be treated accordingly. And the Peruvian government really do need to have her, exactly. Even if it's just a phone call and say, pick her up here, anything, just that needs to be resolved as soon as possible.
So now, are you hoping to present these results in a press conference or in the second part of your documentary? How are you going to put this out?
Barry?
Well, we're working diligently on part 2, and considering how long it took us to get part 1 out, which was record time, we intend to be doing the same for part 2, and because we want everyone to have access to this, everyone should know it, and we're not holding anything back. So definitely the main focus for us is going to be part 2 of the documentary.
And any rough idea of when this might be completed?
The 2nd of Jalember.
I think we're probably looking around about the turnaround, probably around about 3 weeks.
Wow.
We have a very quick turnaround because we want this information delivered as soon as we possibly can. And what's good is that we've had some wonderful responses regarding the documentary because there is no storyboard, there is no planning. It was literally Barry puts the camera on me and I just try and explain the best I can what the hell's going on. And that's because it's very raw, and I think people will obviously see that we'll get the full picture as to it's not just about investigating things like this. It's trying to deal with the language barriers. It's trying to deal with, and I'll be honest, there's so much corruption which is going on from surprisingly numerous different directions, which we were surprised to find, that you don't trust anybody, and of course, the whole point is just to completely empty that glass of water that that of knowledge that we've gathered so far on this case. Just empty the whole thing out and just do this right from scratch in a proper manner and get the right results. And I think we're going to be looking at a quick turnaround. We are looking to do a press announcement as well. With the information, and that will actually come probably after the second part of the documentary.
All right, well, gentlemen, we're almost out of time here. So, really quick, what's your YouTube channel that people can find your the first part of your documentary?
Well, it's called The Mysterious Bodies of Peru, and it can be found on the UFO and Ancient Mysteries Network TV, or it's UAMN TV for short, on YouTube channel. Or you can go straight to zoharstargate.com, and they have numerous different videos on there for their platforms, and you'll find it through that way as well.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. We're out of time, so I appreciate you being on with me tonight, and we'll have to have you on again real soon to talk about the rest of this. So thank you for listening, everyone. You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre. Good night.
You've been listening to Exploring the Bizarre with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. They're taking back the night by jetting non-stop across the cosmos in search of the truly bizarre and totally unexplained, with you as their co-pilot. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. For more information on exploring the bizarre, and hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz, check out their KCOR Digital Radio Network page. Follow their YouTube channel at MRUFO 1100. Exploring the bizarre.